Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're joining us from across the globe. I'm Dr. David Ballard, Vice President of One Mind at Work. On behalf of my colleagues at One Mind and the approximately 150 member and affiliate organizations that are part of One Mind at Work community, I want to welcome you to the 2025 Mental Health at Work Index Annual Report webinar. This year, our focus is mental health leadership at all levels. Today, I'm going to highlight some of the key findings from the index, and I'm going to be joined by Geetika Bhojak, who is the Global Mental Health Lead at Accenture, and Tom Murray, President of Heidrick Struggles. But first, I'm going to do a little housekeeping here. We will have time to take some questions later on, but you can submit them at any time using the Q&A function on Zoom. So click on the little Q&A box at the bottom, drop your questions in, and we'll get to those a little bit later in the webinar. I encourage you to download a free copy of the full annual report. We'll drop a link in the chat for that so that you can grab that report. We'll also share a link so that your organization can complete the Mental Health at Work Index if you haven't already done so. It's a great way to measure and improve your workforce mental health program, to see how you compare to our global benchmarks, and to identify priority actions for improvement. And as a reminder, if you're a One Mind at Work member, that's included as part of your benefits, so there's no extra cost. So now on to today's topic, leadership. In today's chaotic and stressful and rapidly changing environment, workforce mental health is more important than ever. Employers that prioritize mental health are outperforming those that don't. They're attracting and retaining top talent, building resilient teams, and driving better business outcomes. You've probably heard of the challenges posed by environments characterized by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, or VUCA. And things are pretty VUCA'd up right now. But another term came up in a conversation we were having recently with Catherine Gunther, who's the chair of One Mind at Work's Guiding Council and the global head of culture and associate experience at Mars. And that's BANI. And that stands for brittle systems, anxious people, nonlinear outcomes, and incomprehensible complexity. Now, that paints a pretty stark reality as a picture, but Catherine also noted that it points to what organizations need in order to be resilient and to have significant sustainable impact. That requires leadership at every level. Courageous leaders who have the skills, the empathy, the clarity to help employees, to help teams, and the organization as a whole manage their stress and perform with excellence in that type of environment. So as we dig into the data to see what we can learn from the Mental Health at Work Index, our 2025 annual report highlights a critical insight. Executive leaders increasingly understand the importance of mental health at work, and they say it's a priority, but that support doesn't always cascade throughout the organization to get embedded in the strategy and the operations and the culture of the organization itself. In many cases, managers and boards and frontline workers themselves are underutilized and they're not getting the optimal results. So therefore, good intentions aren't turning into measurable impact, either for worker well-being or for organizational performance. But today we're going to learn from some best practice examples where leaders do more than just give lip service to the importance of workforce mental health. They're actually walking the talk, they're taking real action to bring it to life in their organizations, and they're reaping the benefits as a result. So I want to welcome now Geetika Bhojak, Global Head of Mental Health at Accenture, and Tom Murray, President of Heidrick Struggles. Geetika, Tom, thanks for spending some time with us today, and thanks for sharing your experience on this topic.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you, David. Pleasure to be.
We know leadership support matters for the experience of people at work, but also for the organizations. And in our data, we see that organizations with senior leaders who actively support workforce mental health reported less than half the voluntary turnover of those where the leadership support was lacking. So I want to start out just with a big picture question for each of you. Why does the leadership in your organization care about mental health? Why is it important to them? Why don't we start with you, Geetika?
Thanks, David. Very, very importantly, I think back in 2021, when the pandemic hit, it became quite clear that without the focus on people's well-being, we are not going to, achieve what we've set out to achieve as the mission for the organization. But I want to go back a little bit from there. Back in 2016, actually, Accenture started with this whole journey of mental health. and the overall, well-being of its people. And we launched something called the Truly Human program, whereby we said that if we want our people to be better off, having joined Accenture and having worked at Accenture, we need to focus on certain areas of their life, certain areas of their work, as well as personal life, which are going to help them. We consider people to be our most important asset. And we are a people-forward organization in that sense. So the journey really started much before the pandemic, as opposed to a lot of organizations which started, focusing on it back in 2021, 22. So from there, we had a good foundation to really build on the demands and the crisis sort of that we faced in 2021, 22 when the pandemic hit. We already had a good foundation, which included initiatives, programs, vision around people's well-being. And then formally, the research that was done within Accenture, which we called the Net Better Off research, which said that unless we focus on the health and well-being of our people, unless we give them the right environment to upskill themselves, learning initiatives, as well as focus on their career and purpose, we are not going to have a workforce which will be net better off having worked at Accenture. So I think it was the good foundation that we had prior to the pandemic and very focused efforts that we had post the pandemic and during, which would set us up for this success in the world of well-being, so to say.
Great. Thank you. I think it really highlights how important it is to have that solid foundation and how that helps you get through those challenging times, whether it's a pandemic, economic uncertainty, whatever it happens to be. And I love the concept of net better off, that when people come to work in an organization, that they should come out better than when they got there. They should be net better off. I think it's such a simple concept, but we don't often think about it that way. So I really love that framing. Tom, how about you? Why is mental health a priority? Why is it important for you and the other senior executives there?
Yeah, I think first for me, David, it's personal, right? I have three teenagers that, went through the pandemic. Everyone, and I'm very vocal in the organization. Everyone in my house has therapy, and we're comfortable with it. And I think it was really important to lead with visibility and participation of the senior leaders within Heidrick to start to have that conversation so people felt like they could have it. And to do it in larger forums, but also in smaller forums, and lunch and learns, and when we get out to the offices and talking to our employees. But then you have to back it up with action, right? Yeah, it's really important to, we give an annual day paid day for mental health. We say to our employees that if you need to take some time off, during the week for mental health, or if you have a therapy appointment, we're 100% comfortable with that. And then it becomes part of your integrated culture, right? So that takes time, but once you integrate it into the culture the right way, then people feel comfortable talking about it. It's less of you having meetings just on mental health. It's more like integrating that into all your meetings. And so that people feel comfortable and can talk about it and have a place where someone can go to their manager and say, you know what, I need some time on this Friday afternoon. I need some time to go spend more time with my family, and to have that inclusive culture. It's not a light switch. It's really getting more than just a couple people talking about it. But I do think it starts with senior leadership.
Yeah, I think modeling that behavior yourself, as you said, really does a lot more than simply signing a CEO pledge or saying this is a priority for the organization. If people see the leaders in their organization actually participating and being open and transparent about these issues, it normalizes, it reduces the stigma, it makes it okay for them to do the same thing because they're seeing it happen from the top. That's fantastic. That's so rare, though, because in our day data, we found that 86% of organizations say they have at least one senior executive that's engaged in the strategy and activities, which is good, but only 4 out of 10 senior leaders are actually modeling those behaviors and setting a good example themselves. So there's a big drop off between the words that are being spoken and the actions that are carrying through in aligning those. Geetika, I'm curious at Accenture, how does the senior leadership engage and support and model around these mental health efforts in your kind of environment?
Sure. I think I'll quote an example of the network that we've built around mental health in Accenture. So we call this network the Mental Health Ally Network. Today, we have about 22,000 volunteers who support the mental health and well-being of not just themselves, but their friends and family. They're trained to be able to do that, as well as the colleagues that they work with day in, day out. Now, to get a community like that in place, it cannot happen without the support of the senior leadership. So the senior leadership at Accenture, and this is just one of the examples that I'm giving, but as a leader, the push on creating this progressive culture of care, whereby we are building resilience through, for example, this mental health ally network, where the leaders foster this belief. They role model this belief that I care. I care for myself. I care for my family. I care for my community. And I care for you as my colleague. Not just to build a more resilient business, but to build more thriving individuals across Accenture. So I think this commitment to prioritize, this commitment to support the mental health of our people, it's embedded in the companies and the leaders' values, the leadership essentials, which are core to our culture. That is, truly about role modeling first as a leader, being vulnerable as a leader, and then supporting, building of these kind of communities across Accenture. Then, of course, as an organization, if I talk about the senior leadership focus, it's very evident also in the fact that there is a significant amount of investment that is being done in the mental health of our people. So, for example, the services and resources that we have. So we were able to build a case for the investment in those services and resources. So we have a market-leading sort of, suite of programs and vendors who provide the right kind of support. For example, to the caregivers in the organization, the parents, the neurodiverse population, for instance. Also, for that matter, populations that might be subject to some very high-risk situations. Case in point being some of the wars that are ongoing in Ukraine or the Israel-Gaza, crisis for that matter. So a significant amount of investment into supporting our people and different, populations with the right kind of resources. The proof is there in the pudding, as well as that role modeling and supporting of the mental health ally community.
Yeah, that's a consistent message across both of your organizations. When I learned a while back that your ally network with 22,000 members, that's astounding to hear the size of that. But that started smaller as an employee resource group, I believe. How did you take it from an employee resource group to this huge network? And did you have to make the business case to senior executives to demonstrate the value to them of investing in this program?
Absolutely. I think, like I said, the proof was there in the pudding. Um, when we saw the success of the ERG back in the day, I think it was 2020, 2019, 2018, when we took that ERG and built that out into a bigger, sort of ecosystem of the mental health allied training program, where people attended this live facilitated training, which goes with the concept of being a mental health first aider, with the right guardrails, of course. Uh, there was, a clear sort of needle movement in the kind of scores that we were seeing on the engagement surveys that we had for those populations where the ARG was very active in certain countries. And going with that, extrapolating that data also with for example, the utilization and the sentiment analysis that we were able to do with our services, it was a combination of all of those metrics, which, built the business case. And of course, a lot of word of mouth, a lot of, testimonials from senior leaders, leaders at all levels who said that the benefit of a program like this, the right knowledge, the right skills to be able to, within the guardrails of, being in an organization and not, sort of transgressing away from that and becoming a counselor, but no, just, within the guardrails of becoming the support system for the entire team, it was very evident, on the face of it as well.
Great. We'll come back to talk more about the networks in a moment, because I know, Tom, you have employee resource groups as well, and I want to dive into that a little bit in terms of how you support those networks. So we'll come back to that. I'm going to set that aside for a minute. Tom, I want to hear more from you about how the senior executives cascade this support for mental health through the organization. So it's one thing if the CEO or the C-suite is engaged and supportive and modeling good behaviors, and that's an important step. But what we see in our data is that that support gets stuck there sometimes. We find that only 1 out of 4 organizations say that their senior executives then set expectations and hold direct reports accountable for doing the same thing within their particular unit, so that it works its way down all the way in the organization. So how do you take the support that you have, which is very strong at the top, and ensure that that carries through to the next layer and the next layer, so that it becomes part of the culture?
I think part of it is working with, not just giving an action to the group. So joining calls with individuals that are leading 1, 2 levels down, joining country-led calls across the world and participating and talking about it. This has been super personal to me, to get out in front of our employees. And I think when you do more of a global town hall, you have snippets of it. I think it's so much more engaging when you get with groups of 30, 40, 50 people, because it can be a much more interactive session. So we highly encourage our leaders to make it part of their agenda when they're talking to their teams. But I also think it's really important for the more senior folks to go down to 2, 3 levels to the smaller groups and have the conversations, if that's on Zoom. But also, we found when you get out in the field, getting out to the offices, doing a lunch and learn, sitting down with individuals, and most times, David, it's not just about mental health. It's about you spend an hour you go to the London office, you spend an hour with the team, you talk about the strategy, you talk about what we're seeing in the market, and then you talk about how are people doing, how are people feeling, and talking about mental health I think it's a business imperative weaved into your strategy.
Yeah, I think that really highlights the importance of taking it from being a siloed off program or benefit
100%.
or something that's there for a small segment of the workforce, and it just becomes part of the way you work as an organization and part of who you are.
I make sure I weave something in, David, every time when I talk to our internal groups, right? Which is probably anytime from 3 to 6 times a week. I'm talking to a larger internal group, and if we're talking about our competition or our strategy, making sure that the mental health comes up and making sure that people are taking care of themselves.
Geetika mentioned, using the data to make the case to be able to support the value of what you're doing, and that it ties into operations and strategy and business results as well. But you also highlighted the importance of making it personal and telling the story. And I know, Tom, that you all have done some things around storytelling and sharing information. How have you woven that into the work that you've done there?
Yeah, so we've made it to your point, and it's not just me at Heidrick. Many of us on the executive team have made it personal, and I think that brings everyone to the same level, which they should be anyways, right? Where when you're talking to a group of people saying, you know what, I had three teenagers that struggled during the pandemic. They all had different issues. By the way, there was times I struggled during the pandemic, and my wife, who I've been with for 23 years, she struggled through the pandemic. And at all different times, we had ups and downs, and this is how we dealt with it. I think personalize the message. You made a really good point earlier. If you send out the big letter from the CEO or president saying, we're going to focus on mental health, and it's an email, many times people don't even read it, right? Probably about 25% of the people even look at it. But what we found is having interactive discussions, getting in the smaller group forums, having Q&A, it's incredible when you personalize a message how much people actually open up the dialogue, and people will feel like it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to talk about yourself. Whereas I think if you do it at a big town hall, the whole company, or an email, it doesn't have that impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely brings it home and does make it more interpersonal
Right.
and a shared experience.
And
I'm
I'll tell you
curious.
the other great thing, David, just one more thing to add.
Oh, yeah, sure.
The great part about this, which is definitely something I'm proud of for our executive team. It's also, you have that meeting with 30 people if you're in the Chicago office and you're in the Dubai office. And then it's a couple hours later, one to two people stop by your office and talk to you
Yeah.
because they feel like they can.
Yeah, it certainly it breaks down barriers and walls, and I think makes people more accessible as leaders who are often separated out and may not be as in touch with the day-to-day experience on the ground in the organization. So it breaks through some of that. I'm curious for both of you. One of the things that we talk about on the leadership front is the importance of combining executive leadership with the non-executive board support. Being a business imperative, paying attention to workforce mental health, it's part of risk management. It's part of ensuring that the organization can perform and be as successful as possible and have a sustainable workforce. So even within ESG reporting frameworks, this is something that a board of directors should be paying attention to if they want the organization to be successful long term. So I was curious for both of you, is the board or governance bodies involved and supportive? How do they engage, if they do, around the mental health efforts?
Well, let me put it this way. There is so at Accenture, there is a grading that is done, which so there is a body which assesses the kind of programs that any organization. So it's an external body which assesses the kind of programs and the support that is available within Accenture. We have a presence in 26 countries. So there is a grading system, there is a point system, which is, adhered to as a policy. So from that perspective, it becomes, ingrained. It has to be ingrained, even if, there were some pockets within the organization, and that is true for any organization for that matter. There would be pockets where, one would feel that it's just lip service and we are not really walking the talk. This very close scrutiny on the kind of systems that we have in place, the kind of processes we have in place is there, as is true for many other organizations apart from Accenture. So yes, it's a part of the entire, fabric of how things are assessed and how things are tracked as well in this space, at least within the organization. Plus, I think it's about apart from all of that, like Tom rightly said, it is about the interpersonal human at the end of the day, the human connect. So at the team level, at the very granular team level, uh, the conversations, the check-ins by the leaders, the way in which this messaging and support is embedded into the ways of working of the individual is the last mile where one has to go to, uh, especially given the scale of organizations like ours. So, yeah,
Yeah,
embedding it into the real day-to-day ways of working. And it could be as simple as giving the permission to someone to take a 5-minute break between meetings, not have a 30-minute, but a 25-minute meeting, have a walking meeting, uh, have some time on the calendar where you're dropping your kids off to school or just having dinner with your family, giving the permission and the agency to that employee to be able to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's highlighting how you're weaving that through the programs and policies and operations of the organization, just as the part of the ways of working there. Um, Tom, on the governance end of things there, the board end of things, is there involvement and support? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, so we have our board meeting coming up in a couple of weeks, and this will be part of when we give our business updates and our different lines of business. We always weave in something to do with mental health and how employees are doing. We're just coming off our employee survey, which is closing up in the next week, and that will give us really good data on how our employees are feeling. And frankly, I think some of the unemotional metrics like attrition, right? I mean, we have metrics within the business that show us the state of our employees, right? And people talk with their feet in terms of if they're happy or they're not happy. And we feel like there's a direct correlation from mental health, how employees are feeling, and what our attrition rates are. And we talk about that with the board. We think it's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think keeping it in front of the board, tying it to those business outcomes, reporting data, things that don't typically happen in most organizations, I think raises the awareness of how these things fit together and work collectively for the experience of the people who work there, but for the performance and success of the company too.
And that's why
I want to
metrics
shift
help so much.
down.
Just on that, that's why metrics help so much, because if you look at different countries, you look at different businesses, and you see certain spikes in certain areas, you start to think about what's going on with the leadership in that area. Is there certain things? A really good point was made earlier. Certain parts of the world right now are struggling with what's going on. We know that, but being able to see the metrics, leverage the metrics to dive into those employee groups.
Yeah, that you're talking about the need to identify where there may be variability within the organization. I mean, it's one thing to
Absolutely.
know where there are needs and challenges and stressors across the organization, but very often there are specific things in certain locations or job functions that you need to pay attention to and address and support, which it is really why that needs to filter down in the organization to the manager and supervisor or the head of a business unit level, and not just stay there up at the executive leadership. So, managers and supervisors have an outsized impact on people's experience day to day on the job. So whether they're supporting or not, that's really important. And in our data, we find that the good news is that about 3/4 of organizations that have done the index say that managers and supervisors are allocating work time for people to engage with and participate in the mental health programming that's going on. 6 out of 10 are actively encouraging people to use the available benefits and resources that they have at their fingertips. But the downside is only about 1 in 3 are translating that for their particular unit. So taking the big organizational message and saying, well, how does this play out in our particular department or in your job within our team, and making it meaningful and relevant in that local environment. But we also know that organizations where managers support workforce mental health comprehensively, the employee satisfaction ratings went up last year more than double the rate of those where managers weren't supportive that way. So again, it was tying to people outcomes and business outcomes there. So, Tom, starting with you, what role do managers and supervisors play in sort of tailoring and customizing what you're doing organization wide to make sure it's meaningful and relevant, personally at a work unit level?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's to your earlier point of making sure the message gets all the way down and the leadership team is interacting because, David, you're spot on. I mean, I fundamentally believe, people stay at a company because of their peers and the people they work for, right? And is that a comfortable environment for them, and are they enjoying going to work every day? So we have very high participation in our ERGs as a company. So we feel like there's different avenues to get the message across. It's the day-to-day manager, definitely matters. We're making sure they're armed with the right talk tracks and talking points to talk to their teams, but also creating an environment where people are very comfortable and can always take the time to participate in the ERGs and other focus in office groups that are getting together. We never want people to feel like they can't do those type of things because they're too busy where they are. That's your manager, right? That's your manager saying, it's fine. Please go to the ERG meeting that you want to go to. Please take that time off. But it's all leading by example. And the key example is the person you're directly working for.
Yeah. So Geetika, to you, Accenture has what, 750,000 employees in something like 26 different countries. How do you take this global effort that you work with and make it relevant at a local level? How are you engaging managers and supervisors to make it translate across all of those environments? It's got to be tremendously complex and highly variable.
Absolutely. I think if it was left only to the global sort of teams, then the message would be lost in PowerPoints and Excels, and that would be the end of it all. It really comes to life in those smaller teams in a particular market unit, in a particular country, where the message needs to be customized according to the needs of that particular group. I'll give you my example. I come from India. I am in Mumbai. And the kind of resources that are available to me in country are very different from what would be available in a Japan or, a San Francisco for that matter. Now, to ensure, first of all, that we have the right fabric, the right landscape of support, equitable support across, the different countries that we have, that is what the global team can do. But then the message, the actual support that needs to be customized according to country, according to that particular team, the account, the business, is really up to the country leads of that that particular network. Mm-hmm. So I'm going back to my mental health ally community example. So today we have about 50 in-country leads who manage the network and customize the global content to suit the needs of that particular population. Also, we work with different cross-functional teams. So why reinvent the wheel when it is, when we have seen success already in some other logistical spaces? So when we wanted to bring this program to our people, we said, okay, what is a mechanism that we can follow? Let's join hands with the learning teams who are already, running the virtual programs. They have the entire infrastructure online and offline. Let's make this a learning program, a live facilitated learning program, which can be run with the help of the country leads and the learning teams. And that is how practically we saw the success. If we were to hold it as a global initiative, it would have just sat within a small but mighty team of maybe about 10 people, and that would be the end of it all. So I think the takeaway that I would have on this is give the credit, give the power into the hands of people in country, work with cross-functional teams, and let them embed the message and customize the message according to their needs. You can just give them, you can be the wind beneath their wings, give them the right materials, give them the right knowledge, and let them run with it. I think that's what's seen success. At a strategic level, we have partnerships with the country CHROs and the market CHROs, along with the CEOs of different markets as well. And we work with them in terms of key moments throughout the year, in terms of what, Tom said earlier, being a part of their business town halls and making sure that the message is getting embedded.
Yeah, I think you're really talking about the importance of involving and engaging employees at all levels and hearing their voices. It comes up often that your people are the experts. They know best their particular environment. And while it's important to have the overarching strategy and be intentional what you're doing company-wise, if you want it to be effective, you need the input and the feedback and the involvement and engagement of the people in each of those areas to make it work effectively and to make it be a good fit. One of the things I want to get back to the networks in just a minute, because I think it's an important one. You highlighted using both a cross-functional team and your ally network as sort of two layers of really getting high involvement across the organization. And Tom, I'm going to go back to you for a second because I know you have employee resource groups as well. In our index results, we found that 4 out of 10 organizations said they had some sort of network or champions network or ERG that was related to mental health in the organization, but only about a quarter of those was fully equipping them with the data and resources that they needed to function effectively on the ground as leadership at a grassroots level. So, Tom, at Heidrick, how did you equip your ERG? How do you support them to be able to do the work and to lead on the ground in their particular departments or offices?
Yeah, I think, we are very lucky. Our chief inclusion officer is incredible and is continually interacting with the group, making sure they have the right support that they need. And frankly, different groups want to operate in a different way. And we try to give them the ability to lead those groups the way they want to lead, but also give them, to your point, the materials and the talk tracks they need to help people in certain environments, and especially in terms of mental health. And that's where our chief diversity officer, CEO, head of HR, we consistently rotate and participate in the groups and make sure we're visible. But we also want to make sure that they have times where it's just the group and they're in a safe place and they can have the conversations as well. So with the employee research groups, it's a really, from my perspective, it's a balance on letting them be employee-led and having the initiatives and the meetings that they want to have, but knowing that we're here to support them in any way. And I think having that, if you try to overmanage the employee resource groups, I think that can actually hurt the group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they need to be empowered to be
with 100% and feel comfortable that they can drive their own agenda. Now, the great thing is we're very lucky with our leaders, our employee resources groups. They raise their hand and they tell us exactly what they need. They're not shy.
Yeah, well, it's clearly an environment where there's good psychological safety. They can speak up, they can ask for things that they need, they can share concerns, and so on. So I think empowerment is an important element of it, but so is equipping them with the resources and the tools and the knowledge that they need to be able to function in that way. Geetika, with a network as large as you have, how do you support and prepare and provide the resources that your ally network needs to be able to be effective and functional?
Sure. It's something that now has become sort of on autopilot because we've been running this for a number of years now. It's not something that happened overnight or maybe even 1-2 years. It's something that has, like I said, had its roots back in 2019 and now formally became an ally network in 2021. So in terms of the support that is provided to the network across the various countries, first thing, having a country lead in each one of those countries. And for, organizations with different sort of formats. Maybe you just have a presence in one country. It could mean having a lead across the various verticals and service lines within that country. So having an accountability partner at whatever level you feel is wise within the organization. That is number one. Number two, in terms of the right materials and resources, to be able to look at how the well-being of our people, how it is being promoted, how is the message being laid out, how is the stigma being worked upon, as well as looking at what is the right level of support. What are the guardrails within which we want our allies? What is the role of an ally? So giving all of that knowledge, making that available to the network so that they're not starting from scratch each time. So what we did was we actually partnered with you, One Mind Network, David, you and Kathy, and many other SMEs from your organization who reviewed our content and gave us the green light that we are on the right path and this is what needs to be included from the perspective of mental health first aid and compassion fatigue. How do you take care of yourselves as an ally as well? So making that right level of knowledge, materials and resources available to the countries through these country leads. And then engaging with them across various time zones, across various countries. So what we do is we have a monthly connect with the country leads, as well as we have train the trainer sessions that are run by me and my team to sort of bring in new facilitators of the program. We are evolving this even further. We are making this into a credential that would hold this value proposition in and outside of the organization. And, we'll talk about that in just a moment. But I think it's keeping it simple and working your way through the accountability buddies, so to say, that you have across the network.
Yeah, I love the thought that you've tied this into professional development. So this, this is part of a career path and a skill set and something that you can use to advance in your career. Could you talk a little bit more about the turning it into a credential aspect? So, making involvement, engagement, participation in the Ally Network or taking a leadership role in one of these areas, making that part of someone's overall professional development there at Accenture. How are you doing that?
Yes, it's something that we are very proud of. I think it's a market leading sort of a proposition that we have for our people. So what we are saying is that becoming a champion is, yes, of course, about the human connect, but it's also about your own professional development. So we've charted out an entire journey for you to, partake as an Accenture employee. So you start with sort of the mental health essentials knowledge, which is pure play, theoretical and practical knowledge around what is stress and what are some of the signs and symptoms around common mental health conditions and so on and so forth. Post that, there is a live facilitated session with an expert where you get to learn what are the skill sets. How do you hold a mental health related conversation? How do you approach someone who might be in distress or in support? Or how do you support someone who comes to you asking for, help? How does that mental health conversation look like within the organization? And then what are some of the resources that are available within the organization that you can signpost within the right, boundaries? signpost the resources to our people, because most often than not, it's about the lack of knowledge and awareness that the employees have. They don't even know that there is an EAP that exists, EAP service that exists. They don't even know that, they can go for neurodiversity counseling within within an organization. So they're equipped with the right skill set, the right knowledge, the right how to signpost, etc. And post this, the third sort of step and the last step in the journey is that they undergo an assessment. They take an assessment, which is a situational based assessment, a judgment sort of a test. And a successful completion of that would give them the credential of becoming a mental health ally.
Yeah, a very thoughtful approach to it, and I think that shows the value of partnering with learning and development and the other areas in thinking through how do you best equip people, provide the resources, train them, evaluate and assess competencies that they're developing around it, and turn it into something that's a part of their career development, which is really exciting. Tom, I want to come back over to you because Geetika talked a lot about the partnership piece. In particular, she mentioned learning and development. But one of the things that we find in supporting workforce mental health is it doesn't live in just one place in an organization. There are things that touch up against human resources or occupational health and safety or training and development and a variety of other areas, communications, for example. How do you at Heidrick Struggles make sure the right people are around the table to have those sort of cross-functional perspectives to make sure that all of those touch points are working together in a coherent way so that it's a shared responsibility? It's not just living in one particular role or office within the organization.
Yeah, like most professional services firms, we're matrixed on steroids, right? So everyone feels like they have 2 to 4 bosses, right? Yeah. So it's getting that message out to everybody. If I think about the US for a minute, we have our regional managing partners that actually are for domain. If it's healthcare or consumer, we have what we call our PICs, our partners in charge. We have our head of the Americas. The tricky part is you want to keep everybody on message, right? To that earlier point, and that everyone is singing from the same hymn sheet, because you can actually just really confuse employees if that's not happening. And there's and what we try to be sensitive, and David, we can always get better, is we don't want to have internal meeting palooza all the time either, because we're professional services firm. We want people to go out and see clients. So it's the balance of making sure our partner in charge in the New York office, our America's leader, and our regional managing partner for the healthcare practice are in sync on what we want to do as a company. And then also the balance of being very self-aware. And Geetika made a great point earlier. Every country's different, right? And listening to the people in country and what their needs are, the differentiation of that, and making sure that there's not an 80-20 on this. It's really listening to your employees and saying, okay, our employees in India, where we have a big base as well, nothing like Accenture, but a big base for Heidrick. It's what are the issues they're dealing with today? That's different what the people in Dubai are potentially dealing with, and in London are potentially dealing with, and making sure we have consistent themes on mental health as a company. But we also know that we have variation in geo, and those leaders have the ability to lead with their variations. It's very, from our perspective, local is very important in terms of mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. You both of you in your organizations have really embedded this in the broader organizational strategy and the operations of the organization, in the culture of the organization, and you've tied it to business results. I mean, Tom, right up front, you said this is a business imperative, and Geetika, you talked about how you demonstrated business outcomes of the health and well-being work that you were doing to be able to support your ongoing work. But for organizations, so for people who might be on this webinar, or for others who are listening, who are in organizations that either aren't as far along on the journey, or they're in a smaller organization, or in one that doesn't have the resources, as robust resources available to do it. but they want to start tying this to business outcomes. They want to start making this an integrated piece of the way they function as an organization. What kind of guidance would you give them about where to start with that? And Tom, why don't we stick with you to start with
Sure. Yeah, I think there's some simple principles, right? We need to run a business, but we also want to be good humans.
Yep.
And I saw one of the chats came in asking about, what happens when a client wants you to work late. Well, we work late, right? We're here to serve our clients, and delight our clients is very important. But I think the balance of that, and some of this really, David, is just common sense. Is okay. You're here late a couple nights this week. Well, take a half day on Friday. Just go.
Mm-hmm.
Just leave. But being honest with people, we have expectations of our employees, and we want to be the top talent advisory firm in the world all day long. But we also want people to have really strong mental health and feel like it's a great place to work. Some of this is just having open, honest conversations with your employees on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
And for that first line manager, as you brought up earlier, knowing your people and knowing what they've been working on and saying, you know what, don't come in today, work from home. We believe, we really think be there when it counts, right?
Yep.
We don't need people punching a time clock anymore. That's very old school, right? But we do have an apprenticeship model. So there's a balance. We love to see people in the office. We don't tell them they have to be in the office,
Mm-hmm.
right? And having that balance, but when they're there, we want them to be able to enjoy the people they're with, but we also want them to develop. So it's a real balance.
Yeah. Geetika, how about you? What guidance would you offer if the leader or an organization was wanting to move this direction and start tying this and integrating it more in their organization?
I completely agree with what Tom said, that, there will be periods of, we are high performing organizations. All of us, we have our goals and we want to fulfill those goals as an individual or as a big company. Now, giving that permission to the team lead, to the manager, to be able to say that, okay, yes, there was a stretch, strain period. We don't want it to become a crisis period at the end of it all. Let's just take a little moment to, reset and replenish the energy that has been taken away, because it is common sense. Now, how do you do that? Very practically, building those in the moment, within those stretch periods. Are there some things that can be done day in, day out, at the start, middle, or end of the day, for example, to be able to replenish my energy? And after that stretch period is over, is there something that can be done, like Tom said, taking a Friday afternoon off, or uh, you know, really deliberately making sure that you're investing in some of those self-care practices, whether it's around your movement, nutrition, sleep, or maybe some mindfulness practices that become your go-to every day and in the long term as well. So one would be that. And second, to your point, how do you build a business case, and how do you make sure that, well-being becomes mental health and overall health and well-being, it becomes a part of the strategic priorities? Look at the surveys that are already run within the organization, no matter how small or big. Today, we have so many surveys which are related to engagement, and find out those questions that have a direct link to well-being. Create those trend lines, which can be very supportive in terms of building the business case. I think that would be a good place to start. Yeah.
Yeah, I think measurement and reporting that out and using and tracking to improve your program going forward, but starting to collect data, identify what the important outcomes are in the organization for people and for the business. Start tracking those and map that to what you're doing over time. And I think for an organization starting out, it doesn't have to be big or overly complicated. Focus on the things that are important, and you can always build and evolve that moving forward. We're almost to the end of our time. I want to hear from both of you just really quickly. So maybe in 1 minute or less. Tom, we'll start with you. What's next on the horizon for Heidrick Struggles in terms of supporting workforce mental health? What direction are you headed? What are you excited about? What's the future look like?
Yeah, I think it's a journey, and I think the mental health journey is employee led, not executive led, right? And we want our employees to feel as though Heidrick Struggles is a very safe place that they can consistently work on their mental health and be very comfortable in our environment. Now, that's not a one size fit all. That we have, well, you can do it through your ERGs, you can do it with the teams you work for, you can do it for the practice that you're in. But basically, we want it to be all the above. That all our organizations have consistent messaging, have a consistent philosophy in terms of culture, and how our employees have the ability to interact with their teams and really make sure that, most importantly, they're taking care of themselves.
Fantastic. Geetika, what's on the horizon?
The vision is to be the most mental health friendly workplace on this planet. And to be able to do that, I think the first course of action that we are seeing is to look at some very specific needs that certain populations might have, whether it's in the space of substance abuse, domestic violence, sobriety related issues, or for that matter, like I said earlier, we most of our population is the sandwich generation, taking care of elderly as well as the kids. So what are some caregiving resources that we can provide, as well as, the professional resilience piece, which is around neuro inclusion. So going specific uh, and making sure that we absolutely carry on removing the stigma, breaking the stigma around asking for help.
Well, thanks both of you for spending the time today. I wish we had another hour to talk. There's so much good work that's happening and things that we could dive into. But thank you, Geetika. Thank you, Tom, for sharing your experiences and the great work that you're doing at Accenture and at Heidrick and Struggles. I want, as a reminder to those who've joined us today, you can download the report using the link that was just dropped into the chat, or you can go to mentalhealthindex.org. There's also a link to download it from there. I encourage you to complete the index for your organization if you haven't done it, to get the data, the baseline, and measure and improve your program. And in closing, I want to leave you with a quote from Indra Nooyi, who is former CEO of PepsiCo. And she said, "Leadership is about understanding. You can't understand unless you listen. Really listen, not just to the words, but to the emotions, the concerns, and the unspoken challenges that your team faces. Listening is the bridge between management and true leadership." So whether you see our current environment as VUCA or BANI or some other framework that captures these challenges, it's going to take all of us and all of our voices together to create a healthy, high-performing work environment where we can not only weather the storms of today and the storms of tomorrow, but we can also create healthy environments that leave people net better off. So thanks again, and be well.